What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The French experiment with the business class, launched back in the 90s, failed. The 605 sedan was unpopular, and the Peugeot 607 finally confirmed the failure of attempts to fight in the business class. The more compact 407 was more successful, although it did not bathe in the rays of market glory. Having evaluated all this, when creating a new car, the French decided to spend a minimum of money on development and get a maximum result. So, the successor with the index 508 speaking about the junction of classes was called to replace both models at once. At that, the technical recipe remained simple. The same PF3 platform from 407 was taken as a basis, having increased the wheelbase by 9 cm and having reduced a huge front overhang. As a result, the 508 sedan turned out to be 11.5 cm longer than the 407, but 8 cm shorter than the former flagship 607. The model made its debut in 2010, and full-fledged sales began in 2011. The novelty reached Russia only a year later. The cars appeared in our showrooms in early 2012. However, the delay was not too critical. A large sedan from Peugeot and station wagons were not brought to us was obviously a niche product. Even the fact that the French have moderated aspiration to extravagance at development of the model, having made it rather strict, both outside and especially inside, did not help. At that, both gasoline and diesel variants were brought to us. Gasoline 1.6 produced 120 or 150 horsepower, and the alternative was a diesel 2-liter motor with 136 horsepower. Moreover, we were offered the top version of the GT with a 2.2-liter diesel engine with 204 horsepower. Prices were also quite marketable. At the start, the 508 cost from 840,000 to 1.2 million rubles, and the GT version cost 5 million. Over time, of course, prices rose. By the restyling of 2014, the sedan imported from France cost at least 1.6 million. Nevertheless, sales with us continued until the very end of the model's production in 2018, although by then we were left with a choice of only 2 motors, and prices ranged from 1.8 to 2.4 million rubles. Sales ranged from a few hundred to 1,500 cars a year, so the promises to bring to us and the second generation 508 expectedly ended with nothing. Well, the fans of French cars are left to look at the secondary market, where the choice of 508 is also small. At the moment of writing, there were only 88 cars for sale on Avito, and 76 of them pre-restyling. Let's take a look at what's worth choosing from this meager volume of offers. The bodies of most cars were preserved very well. The paint is not the strongest, but galvanization allows to paint over the chips and by the appearing problems. However, it was not without firm sore spots. The main of them is wings, especially front ones. Here corrosion originates on the inner side, starting from the mounting brackets, and when it reaches the outer part of the fender, it is often a large front of loose corrosion, raising the paint with bubbles. Often it comes to the point that the edge of the fender at the junction with the bumper is so rotten that the entire fender is simply replaced. Rear fenders also suffer from corrosion, but to a lesser extent, although you can bring them to the sin. To reduce the risks, it is necessary to be attentive to the condition of aperture cavities, washing them from dirt and treating them with anti-corrosion. The sills are also worth paying attention to down here. They too are slowly giving up under the pressure of sandblasting and chemistry, so corrosion is also very likely to occur here, especially in the seam area. After physical damage to the sill by curbs or stones, rust can develop more quickly. Sometimes it is even necessary to partially replace the outer sill. The condition of the underbody also depends on the presence of damage, but surface corrosion is also certain, especially at the rear and around the subframes. Otherwise, the body is decently preserved, and you can inspect the most typical places: the hood, windshield frame and the front edge of the roof, the bottoms of the doors, door openings and the trunk lid, which is deprived of the license plate niche and most of the potential problems. Body parts for the 508 are not as rare as you might think. Of course, many things are available only under the order and prices for original parts are decent, but there are substitutes for almost everything. For example, you can buy a front bumper for $30,000 to $35,000 instead of $60,000 to $80,000 and a front fender for $15,000 to $25,000 instead of $25,000 to $35,000. Hood even non-original will cost $40,000, which is a lot, but the firm will cost even more expensive, $55,000 to $80,000 depending on the supplier and delivery time. But there are windshields in the range from 8 to 20,000 rubles at the cost of the original in 40 to 50,000. Another potentially expensive thing is optics. Halogen headlight is not a problem, even the original costs about 35,000 and analogs are offered for 15 to 35. But here the price tag on a xenon headlight is already deep six figures and the piece analogs are not far behind. So in some cases, only a foreign dismantling shop can help to save money. Local Peugeot 508 is not a frequent guest. Despite the PF3 platform from Peugeot 407, the suspension schemes of 508 have been simplified, the front double wishbone with separate steering knuckles were kept only for the powerful GT version, and the rest are satisfied with the usual McPherson. However, the rear multilever was moved without reductions. In maintenance, 508 will not be more expensive than People's 407 and even predictably cheaper in terms of front suspension. For example, the front lever assembly can be bought non-original at a price from 5 to 30,000, although the original is asked for 30 to 40,000. However, there is usually no need to buy the whole arm. Ball bearing is normally attached to the bolts and costs 1 to 4,000 in the non-original version and 2 to 3,000 for the original. The rear silent block in the assembly with the cage can also be bought separately for 3 to 8,000. Yes, and other silent blocks are also available in the assortment, so you can do without reassembly. The hub bearing is also changed separately, and the non-original can be bought for 2 to 9,000 at the price of the original in 9 to 10,000. The front shock absorber will cost 8 to 10,000 for the original and 3 to 8 for analogs, and consumables like stabilizer bars are cheap. Of course, the maintenance of the double wishbone suspension will cost more. The lower boomerang arm is actually the same here, but there is also an upper arm for 7 to 8,000, a steering knuckle with ball bearings, and a set of silent blocks. In general, everything here can be bought non-original, but the complexity of the node is higher, as well as repair costs. The rear multilever from Peugeot 407 is also unlikely to ruin. The upper arm in assembly can be bought for 6 to 15,000 instead of 30 to 40,000, the lower transverse links even in the original version are available for 5 to 6,000 and the longitudinal arm will cost 3 to 10,000 for the analog or 15 to 20 for the original. Of course, there is also a range of non-original silent blocks for almost all positions, so you can save money on the levers. The rear hub is changed only as an assembly, but substitutes are available for 3 to 10,000 at the price of the original in 7 to 10. Taking into account that Peugeot can't boast of hydropneumatics, which was equipped with related Citroën C5, there are no excessively expensive potential problems here. Brakes in 508 are quite simple, disc brakes with single piston mechanisms with a floating bracket around the circle. Except that there are 3 variations of front discs, they can have a diameter of 283, 304 or 340 mm, and behind in any case there will be unventilated discs for 290 mm. The cost of consumables is moderate, but depends on the specific variant. For example, a disc for 283 mm costs 5,000 for the original and 3 to 10 for analogs, although there are more expensive options. But the prices for a 340 mm disc only start at 5,000 and apart from a well-known manufacturer will cost 8 to 12,000. And the array of prices reaches 20. The same thing with brake pads, price tags start from thousands of rubles for a set, but a decent option will cost 3 to 5,000. The rear brake disc costs about 5,000 for the original and from 3 to 10,000 for analogs. Another system that should be removed attention is the parking brake. The handbrake can be ordinary and can be electromechanical. The second will please the control unit with plastic gears and a 6-figure price tag. And there are no non-original variants, good thing, owners have already mastered repair with reproduction of gears on a 3D printer. The 508 has electro-hydraulic power steering. Accordingly, the rack here is quite usual, with typical resource and the same typical cost of repair. By the way, a new original rack is not so expensive, from 50 to 60,000, and a restored one can be bought for 25 to 40,000. But the pump here is electric, united with a tank, and the price tag on a new assembly is six-figure, and both on the original and on the analog from Bosch. So the desire to save money means either repair or return to the dismantling. The good news on this background is quite decent reliability of the electric pump if you change oil in the system once in 50,000. It can serve up to 200,000 kilometers. Manual gearboxes were not brought to us, all 508s at dealers were two-pedal. The base gasoline engine was combined with the EGS6 robot, created exactly on the basis of six-speed mechanics. It received all classical operational disadvantages of simple robotized transmissions, slow shifts, failures in traction, hesitation in work and so on. From the point of view of reliability, it cannot be called frankly bad, but there are not many reasons to choose this particular box. And there are two key reasons. The first is a classic automatic Aisin TF80SC, which worked in pair with other motors. It is very good by itself, and on the background of slow robot seems to be an alternative choice. The box is quite reliable, though rather sensitive to quality of service. If you change oil every 50,000 kilometers and monitor the cleanliness of at least the standard heat exchanger, it will pass up to 200,000 kilometers before intermediate repair with torque converter reassembly and replacement of the locking plates. The standard heat exchanger, however, can be replaced with something more productive. And it is also worth watching for oil leaks. Sometimes the heat exchanger can be one of the weak points. The choice of motors on our market was quite complete. The gasoline lineup is represented by a 1.6-liter motor, which in the atmospheric version produces 120 horsepower, and in the supercharged version, 150. There were also two diesels, 2-liter at 136 horsepower and a powerful 2.2-liter on the GT version, producing 204 horsepower and 450 Newton-meters of torque. It would seem that such a set can satisfy the wishes of all buyers. But in fact, there is a catch. Gasoline units, atmospheric EP6C and supercharged EP6CDT, belong to the Prince family. They have so many potential problems that we have devoted to their analysis separate article. Malfunctions with chain timing, oil loss, unsuccessful piston and other difficulties make the purchase of a car with such a motor quite risky and almost guaranteed expensive. After all, much here is solvable, but the volume of investments should be presented in advance. By the way, the second problem of the robotized transmission is just that it is combined with an atmospheric gasoline engine. However, against the background of gasoline engines, diesels seem to be almost an ideal option. Both motors belong to the DW family. The younger 2-liter one has the index DW10 and the more powerful one, DW12. Motors of this family appeared in the end of 90th years and for this time have proved themselves quite well. Of course, the problems here are probable, but most of them are typical, where of turbines with oil leakage into the intake, breakdowns of injectors and fuel injectors, which cost a lot of money, clogged EGR system and so on. On the older motor, the injectors are piezoelectric, they cost more and are more sensitive to fuel quality. But here there is no double supercharging, as on some other versions of this motor. The turbine here is usual, with one volute, so its repair or replacement will not cost much. In general, diesel motors have only one global problem, low prevalence. Of the 88 cars on sale on the secondary market, 68 are equipped with gasoline engines, that is, the share of diesels is about 20%. But the choice of a used Peugeot 508 actually comes down to finding a well-maintained diesel car from the first or second owner and with a mileage of up to 150,000 kilometers, approx like this of course, you can fiddle with finding the GT version. It makes sense if you want to get the richest equipment, decent dynamics and excellent traction. And the junior diesel, in turn, can boast moderate consumption. The main thing is that Autoteca confirmed the mileage and accident-free history and diagnostics, the declared technical condition. And if everything comes together, Peugeot 508 can become the very ideal Frenchman, about the reasons for buying which will not even be asked by others. In conclusion, the Peugeot 508 presents an intriguing option for those considering a heavy fuel vehicle priced at 1 million rubles. With its blend of style, comfort, and performance, it certainly offers a compelling driving experience. However, potential buyers should weigh the long-term costs of ownership, including fuel efficiency and maintenance, against their personal needs and preferences. Ultimately, whether the Peugeot 508 is worth the investment depends on individual priorities and lifestyle. Make sure to test drive and explore all available options before making your decision. Thank you for watching, and we hope this discussion helps you in your car buying journey.